In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common restaurant manager interview questions and look at how you can craft fantastic answers that will help you land that job. So the first thing that almost always comes up is, what do you know about our restaurant? So this is your opportunity to show that you've done your research and that you know a lot about the restaurant. And the way I always approach these sort of questions is with the diagram on the left. So in the middle of the diagram, you've got what everyone knows. So you've got a small area. So that's not a very great answer if you only know what everybody knows about the restaurant or the obvious things. But of course, you have to make sure you cover it. Otherwise, you're missing something very important. Then going out to what some people know. So if you go out to what only some people know, your answer starts getting better. And for a great answer, you want to cover everything that everyone knows about the restaurant, most of what some people would know about it, and a couple of things that a few people would know, but you have to have really done your research. So the key things you have to make sure you cover in your research is you have to know who owns the restaurant. Is it a corporate chain or is it an individual? And that completely changes your approach to the interview. Obviously, you need to know the type of food. You ought to be aware of what the sort of culture of the restaurant is. A Michelin-starred French restaurant is going to have a very different culture to a biker bar, and you have to really understand that, and that has to come through in the interview. You want to look at the reviews. You want to know what the restaurant's doing really well at, what things that you would look at working on to improve. You want to know the brand vision, especially in individual-owned restaurants. What is the proposition that the brand is getting across? And you have to know exactly what cuisine they're serving and in what context. For example, a French cafe and a Michelin-starred French restaurant has a very different context to the cuisine. Even though they're perhaps serving the same food, there's a different context. You have to buy into that and understand it. So a top tip is you want to show passion for the restaurant and show that you get it. You get what the owner or what the brand is trying to do, and you really buy into that. If that comes across, your chance of landing the job goes much, much higher. Second thing that always comes up is asking about, how you manage employees. And one of the problems employees tend to have in restaurants is that they're late. So how do you deal with it? And a good answer, you want to start always by saying that you are on time. You're always doing the right thing. You're setting an example, because if the restaurant manager is not doing the right thing, the staff can't reasonably be expected to be held to a higher standard than the manager. The manager is setting the standard, and you have to be that example in the restaurant. You also have to make sure you follow the company procedures, so you will find out exactly what the owner or the corporate take on that is and what procedures are in place, and you're going to follow it. You're not going to make it up yourself. You're going to follow what you've been told to do, and you have high expectations. You don't accept being late. You know it's not acceptable. A terrible answer is say you'd fire them, because chances are you probably don't have the authority to do that, and also it is expensive firing employees. You have to rehire them, and there's all sorts of legal implications. So you ought to be very careful of that. You want to make sure that you show the high expectations. So showing low expectations in an answer might be saying something like, well, if they do it too much, then it's a problem. But from time to time, people are late. That's just a reality of restaurant life. And you don't want to come across that you would aggressively challenge them and you're going to be all over them, because that's going to cause employees to burn out and leave, and that's going to cause its own problems. So the key thing is you want to be following the procedures and setting a great example. That's the structure of a good answer, and you're avoiding everything on the bad answer. Third question, how would you deal with an angry or upset customer? And I've got a nice simple procedure to follow to structure your answer. First thing you always start with is de-escalation. You never want to make it worse. So you never want to argue back with them. You never want to be angry, because you're going to have an even angrier customer. So the key is to make the customer less angry. And that's what we call de-escalation. You're going to follow any company procedures on this matter. You're going to treat it with empathy. You want to take, the customer is always right. So if the customer is like, this food is terrible, you've messed up my order or whatever, you don't want to go, well, actually, we did what you asked for, or argue back. You always go, oh, I'm very sorry about that. So you've got the empathy, you've got the customer's always right attitude, and you want to come across as positively representing the brand, because as the restaurant manager, you have so much influence over whether that angry customer has a positive interaction with the brand or a negative. So at the minute they're having a negative interaction, but you can solve it and you can make everything better. And you can have that person who was previously an angry customer become a regular customer. And that does happen. And you want to be the person that achieves that. So structure your answer around those 4 points, and that should hit all of what the interviewer is looking for. Fourth one, strengths and weaknesses. This always comes up. So we'll start by looking at strengths. So for strengths, you need a genuine strength. It needs to be well evidenced, and it needs to be highly relevant to what you're doing. For example, a wonderful answer you could have is, I'm very good at providing excellent service to challenging customers, if you refer to the reference from my previous manager where she recounts and so on. So in this answer, you've got 2 key things. You've got a highly relevant strength. So being good at that makes you a good restaurant manager. And also, you've got the evidence. They don't have to trust that you're just telling the truth, that this really is a strength. That you've actually said, and here is the proof. Perhaps you can't get, as good as referring to a specific restaurant from a previous manager, but you could, give an example of a time where this happened. So have a great strength that's extremely relevant, and always make sure you get in some solid evidence, because that makes it so much more believable and so much more compelling. Moving on to weaknesses, this one's always a trap. You have to be very careful with this. First thing, you need a real weakness. So you have to talk about an actual weakness. The classic terrible answer is to say, I'm too much of a perfectionist. I'm too brilliant. That's a terrible answer, and it makes you just look very arrogant and shows a huge lack of self-awareness. So you don't want to come up with some rubbish weakness. It has to be a genuine weakness. You have to actually be doing something about it. So say, I'm aware of this and I'm doing something to fix it. But most importantly is, when you pick the weakness, don't make it hugely important to the job, because that's going to count against you. If you're going for a restaurant manager job and you say, one of my weaknesses is, sometimes I come across a little rude. Well, you just lost the job. No one's going to hire a restaurant manager who can sometimes be rude to customers. And, I'm trying to be less rude is not a great recovery. So the way to structure your answer is, you want to say, one of the weaknesses that I am aware of, being aware, showing that self-awareness is really important. And then next part is, you have to say, I've been working on this by. So show the awareness, show the solution. Don't put an answer that is hugely relevant to the job and is going to cause you big trouble, because you can lose an entire interview with a bad weakness that shows something about you that you would rather they weren't aware of. So last question always comes up. The interviewer will ask if there's any questions. And I've put 5 suggestions that you can use. A lot of these tap into, the owner's perception of the business, what they're trying to achieve. And it shows that you're really interested in delivering the owner's vision, because the owners are very precious about their, creation. It's like their baby. And if you can show that you're going to nurture that vision and deliver what they want, that makes you so much more compelling. So have a read through these questions, pick the ones that are most suited to you. And the other thing to remember when you're asking questions is, you want to always ask one question that is directly relevant to what you've discussed. So while you're going through the interview, wait for a point, and then you'll see, that's where there's a question. Keep it in mind, ask it at the end. So if you refer to something that the interviewer said previously, it shows you're listening, you're thinking, and you're picking up on things. So hopefully this video has been very helpful to you and helps you prepare. Good advice, write out your answers in full and start learning them so you can make sure you hit all those great points. And finally, thank you very much for watching.